leading the Turi's training program for quite a while now. And the cohort of toxic use reduction planners is a group of people who really get to know each other and get to like bounce ideas off of each other. And this is one of the places where we can do that. If you are not currently a toxic use reduction planner, it may be that you're here because you are responsible for, or at least associated with your facilities work on annual toxics reporting. So welcome to you all. Today we're going to be going over sort of the basic concepts of materials accounting. We're going to have a couple of breakout discussions, and I'm going to set up the breakout so that each breakout room has at least one person from the TURA program present. We're going to really dive into the math that you really need to have a good handle on in order to do materials accounting properly, so that your reporting is correct, so that your planning is correct. And then some final thoughts. And the webinar is being presented today by Mel Kenerson from GZA. Mel is a veteran TUR planner, has been doing planning and reporting with a number of companies for a long time now. Also has expertise in training and teaching high school people. So if she can do that, she can train us. And I will vouch that she's a fabulous trainer, and some of you may have already seen her in action before. I want to remind folks, particularly those of you who aren't as familiar with the work that the Toxic Use Reduction Institute does, that we do have a website, turi.org. If you scroll to the bottom of that homepage, you can sign up for our newsletter to hear about what's going on, and also to hear about any upcoming events. Or you can go directly to the training and education page on our website to see that. If you are not currently a planner, I want to really invite you to think about it. It is really good training to support you in making sure that you are finding actionable opportunities to reduce your use of toxic chemicals. And many people here have taken the course recently. You know that there's an online portion of the course that you can do at your own pace starting in mid-August. And then we have 4 in-person classes in October. And then if you want to be certified as a general toxic use reduction planner, meaning you can do it for any facility, you would need to then take the exam with Mass DEP. Typically that's in December. So that's all I have to say. You're welcome to reach out to Agnes or I at any time. If you forget our names, you can just do training@turi.org to find out more about any trainings that are coming up. So I'm going to stop sharing and invite Mel to go ahead and share her slides and take it away.
Thanks, Pam. I can just get a thumbs up that everyone can see my slides. I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Agnes. So welcome. This is Math for TUR Planners. I will skip the introduction because Pam always does such a great job with my little bio, as it were. And this is really going to be a deep dive into sections 1 and 2 of the Form S. We're going to spend some time going over the importance of process characterization and, more importantly, data collection and appropriate data collection. And then we're going to jump into looking at specifics of how to fill out that section 1 and 2 of the Form S, which is our mass balance section. A few of the slides, you'll notice that green star in the corner. These are from the May 28th workshop that Pam, as well as a few others, did just a few weeks ago. So if they look familiar, I wanted to give credit where credit was due. I didn't create them, but I'm definitely going to use them. We're going to touch on some of the same topics as that workshop, but again, take a deeper dive into some of those reporting challenges that we all tend to come across. So just a quick reminder, we do talk about manufacture, process, and otherwise use. And I love the way they're on this here with the diagrams, because it lends to where we're going to put them on our process flow diagram. So if we're manufacturing something, it's coming from our process. It shouldn't be leading into it. It's just created somehow during the process. Things that we're processing are flowing through left to right, and then are otherwise used. Typically, we see those come from a top-down approach, just to keep a handle on what's actually ending up in our products, and then what's just in our process but not ending up in our products. So putting this in the world's perhaps simplest process flow diagram, we have our big box. And the thing that I love about the TURA program is, as TUR planners and even not TUR planners, just folks at facilities, we can draw that box however makes the most sense to us. There is no your box must contain, your box must not contain. It's all how you define your production unit. For some things, they're just going to be coming from within. And again, those manufactured, whether it's what you're intentionally manufacturing or what you're coincidentally manufacturing, it's going to start in the box. So those manufactured products will either end up in a product stream if it's intentional. They might end up in a byproduct stream if they're coincidentally manufactured. Things that are processed, typically, again, coming in left to right, and then are otherwise used, again, usually that kind of vertical approach. The one thing that's not on our super simple process flow diagram, or at least not well defined in a super simple process flow diagram, is our byproducts down here at the bottom. And just I'm going to be using the term byproducts throughout this. And byproducts from a TURA standpoint are anything that leave your production unit that are not a product. There may be emissions in your byproducts. And I know when I was first dealing with TUR planners, working with a lot of different clients, I'm a consultant, so I don't have a facility I work for. I have a whole bunch of facilities I work for. But that byproduct emissions term was always a little bit of a sticking point for me to describe to them what I'm looking for. They thought of byproducts as, well, it's something that I'm creating that I don't necessarily want. But that makes it easy to overlook. Especially when it comes to air emissions or things carried off in stormwater. Having a drum of waste that comes out of your product, really easy to say, yep, that waste is a byproduct. But it's those things that you don't often think of because you don't tangibly touch them. It's not in a drum that you're disposing of. It's not other waste stream that you have to somehow manage, even if it just kind of goes down the drain. So make sure when you're building out your process flow diagrams, you may want to have multiple streams for your byproducts. You may have multiple chemicals coming in. You likely have multiple byproducts coming out. When it comes to putting the numbers on your data, on your process flow diagram, and sometimes even making sure to add extra arrows, make sure you're looking at all of the data. One of the things that I notice a lot, and again, I'm coming at this from the consultant's perspective, but it also happens if there's changeover internally, is you're relying a lot on what the person before you did. Many companies have been in TURA for a very long time. Those assumptions on where they're getting their information were established a long time ago. If you're new to doing the TURA reporting, or even if you're not new and you've just been going off of someone else's assumptions, this is a great year to kind of dig deeper into those. Make sure you know where the numbers are coming from. And I have on screen, I'm not going to read through the list, but these are all the different types of records that I've seen and that I know some other TURA planners have seen over the course of the years, where you can get that information from. You need to know how much was processed, how much was manufactured, how much was shipped off site, what all of those different byproducts are, and how much of your TURA listed chemicals are in them. Chances are that's not going to come from one report that you want out of one system. And if it does, I'd love to talk to you because I'd love to get that system in use for some of my clients. Typically, you're getting a bunch of different pieces from usually a bunch of different people. You may be talking to purchasing, to maintenance, to the folks out on the floor that are actually running the batch sheets. And there's good and bad data that you can get. And that's kind of what I want to talk about next. You'll see the last thing on my list is purchasing records. And for me, those always pop up a red flag. If I purchased it, did it actually get used? Yes, we may have purchased 25,000 pounds of a TURA listed chemical, but if we only put 19,000 pounds of that chemical through our process, do I need to worry about it from a TURA planning perspective? And the better your numbers, Tura report is going to be. The better data will get sent to DEP, the better we can look at all the statistics. And especially from a Tura planning standpoint, if you don't have to report a chemical, there's an instant cost savings for your company. So anytime you're given just purchasing records, always try to look at those from a holistic approach. See if you have a start and end of year inventory that you can use against the production numbers. That way you can at least make the assumption that, okay, if we had this much to start with, we bought this much, but then I subtract out what we had left at the year, that gets me closer to what went through the process. But depending on how big your facility is, you may have other areas for inventory. Maybe there's a main inventory room, but then there's a drum or a carboy that's attached to a piece of equipment. And if that's still 2/3 of the way full, it hasn't been processed yet either. So just make sure, again, if you're using those purchasing records, you have all of the other pieces of information to get a truly processed number. Another red flag is anytime you get handwritten data or data out of context. If you're walking across the shop floor and the person's like, oh yeah, we disposed of like, I don't know, 500 pounds of that this year. Well, okay, can you give me some backup for that? Can I get the waste manifests? Can I get some analytical if it was going down a drain? Chances are, if you have a connection to the sanitary sewer, you need to have some sort of recurring analytical for that waste stream, whether it's quarterly or semi-annually, and then you can make some assumptions. One thing I always love is how many common names we have for some of the chemicals too. So if you're looking at, and I'll use the formaldehyde example that Pam used in May, and add MEK to that. I mean, right there, MEK has 3 other names. Formaldehyde, I think I stopped at 6, but the fact that it's methylene glycol, methylene oxide, and methylene aldehyde always just kind of makes me shake my head and say, why? These chemicals have lots of different names, which is why I love that all the Tura listed chemicals have CAS numbers, both with and without the dash. That way you can use whatever search method you like to make sure that, yes, okay, this department calls it MEK, but this department still calls it methyl acetone because that's what used to come on the drums, but you know that it's the same chemical. I won't use my dad's saying for assumptions, but I think we all know that saying. So if you're making assumptions, whether it's from handwritten notes or from, hey, this is just the way we've always done this calculation. We did some air testing back in 1998 when we first entered the Tura program, and yeah, we assume that's still what's going out the stack. Make sure you can back that up. And don't be afraid to say, hey, it's been a decade since we did some air stack sampling. Can we get that in the budget for next year? We've probably improved our process sometime in the next decade, and I'd love to get some credit for those advances by doing some new stack testing. And maybe you need to do it for other reasons as well. Maybe DEP on the air permitting side is also looking for some updated stack testing, so you can kind of get it both with a 1-2 punch. And the last biggest red flag is just blindly trusting work that may be done by others. If you still have that person available, talk to them. If you are the new Tura planner because the previous Tura planner got promoted or took over as plant manager or switched departments, go talk to them. Say, hey, what were you thinking when you did this? And they may explain it and you may totally understand it. But it's also nice when you're bringing fresh eyes to something. And if you're the one that's been doing it for a very long period of time, is there someone else you can talk to say, hey, can you check my assumptions? Who knows? There may be additional knowledge now than there was 2 or 3 planning cycles ago that you can really just beef up your reporting and your calculations and hopefully make it better and easier to use going forward. So why did I spend so much time talking about process flow diagrams, and why are we spending so much time today talking about the mass balance? Well, because it's important. And it's important really for 3 primary reasons. This is a reporting year. You want to make sure that your mass balance is correct. You want to make sure you didn't miss anything. You don't want to underreport or overreport. And I don't know if Rebecca Dolan's on the call, but I'm sure she'd love to have a mass balance that she doesn't have to question. That way she doesn't have to send an email out to you a few months afterwards saying, hey, can you explain this assumption over here? The more information you have to back up your mass balance, the better that mass balance is, the more accurate and understandable your Form S is. Next year, it's a planning year. And it's really important from a planning perspective to know where all of those chemicals are being used. Really, it gives you the whole picture. You may have processes out there where you have a chemical that's used in a product, so it's being processed, and maybe it's also being otherwise used, and maybe you didn't realize exactly what that ratio was before. You knew you used this chemical, let's say sodium hydroxide, you know it's used in this production unit, and you've just always assumed it was processed. And then you find out that a third of it is actually otherwise used. Well, maybe in the process, because it's a validated process, you can't easily change that chemical you're using, but maybe there are some options to reduce it in the otherwise used. And the more granular your data is, the more opportunities there are for you to look at different Tura options and evaluate them because you know exactly where it's coming from. It can also help inform decisions for process modernization or modifications. You know, hey, yeah, I'm using it in this production unit the majority of the time, and well, you know, that production unit's kind of getting towards its end of life. Maybe as we're looking to replace the equipment, we can look at options that also reduce or even eliminate the use of this Tura listed chemical. And it can help also prioritize input substitution. You can't substitute something if you don't know where it's being used. So the more options you have, the better you can inform those decisions. And last, and in my opinion, the most important reason is for employee health concerns. Knowing where those chemicals are can inform you on how to protect your employees from exposure during normal operation and from a spill response perspective, especially for those chemicals that are coincidentally manufactured. Some of the chemicals that are coincidentally manufactured have some pretty significant health aspects. And if you didn't dig deep enough before to know that, maybe didn't even know that you were coincidentally manufacturing some things, you don't know that you're also exposing your employees to these and the health effects of them associated with. So it really is critical to kind of go back to the basics this year and take a deep dive into not only your process flow diagram, but the mass balance, and make sure you know everywhere every Tura listed chemical is being used. And this year, whether it's reportable or not, where it's being used, that way you can kind of track it going forward. So with that, we will jump into breakout session number 1. This is going to be a relatively quick breakout session, only about 5 minutes, but I would just love to get the conversation started about red flags and data gaps. So think about these 2 questions and then discuss them once you get into your groups. What red flags do you typically see or expect to see in the data that you receive? And again, I presented my red flags. You may have others, and I'd love to hear some of those others. And then what data gaps have you seen in your data, and how have you resolved them? So maybe you realize that there was an emission source that was overlooked, or you've been relying historically on only purchasing data, and there's a data gap because maybe it doesn't all get processed. But we'll take a 5-minute breakout, and then we'll come back, discuss these questions really quickly, and then we'll get into that math that Pam promised.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, I'm going to open up the rooms, and I will give you a 60-second timing for when we come back. So go ahead and think about these questions and talk amongst yourselves.
Okay, we'll give everyone another few seconds to come back from the breakout rooms. But hopefully all the breakout rooms had as wonderful discussions as we did in the one that I was assigned to. I will be asking for, let's say, 3 people to go over some of the points that came up in their room. So what are some red flags you have, and what are some data gaps, and what have you done about it?
I'll start just because, you know, whatever. So Dylan Arnold was in our group, and he was, you know, actually everybody in my group was basically taking over the reporting duties at their facilities. Almost everybody, I should say. So the question is not that we know that there are data gaps, but if we discover there are data gaps and that is something that has propagated for a number of years, what does DEP want us to do? Do we go back and amend our reporting? Is there a certain amount of time that we have in order to do that? I did recommend that they reach out, that any facility reach out to OTA if you need any assistance with that kind of issue. And we have John Rashko and Elishaba Thareen and Kayana White, who is their newest technical assistant at OTA, available. But maybe that's a question for you, Rebecca.
So if you find a mistake in a prior year's report, you do want to go ahead and amend it. The regulations, which I'm trying to pull up right now to find it, has a piece about how long, once you find the mistake, how much time you have. So the sooner the better. If you found a mistake and you're still trying to like flush it out, but you know you need to fix it, just keep track of how you're working it out. If you need assistance, I would definitely recommend you contact OTA and Turi. If you need to reach out to me and say, hey, I'm working on it, but I know I need to amend, that's okay too. And as a bunch of new folks that are working on taking over things, you might not necessarily have access if the person that you're replacing is gone. DEP had a hard time with amends being able to be made last year. So if you didn't have access to the transaction, it used to be only the owner that could make the amend. We changed that this year. So if you need to amend and you don't have access to it, definitely get in touch with me. We can have transactions transferred to you, or we can have you added to the transaction so you have the ability to make the change. That's a piece that we're trying to fix to make it easier for everybody to do that.
Thanks, Rebecca. Is there anyone else that wants to share what was discussed in their breakout room?
We were group 4, and for ours, it was, you know, having been a field inspector down in Virginia, you know, it was always, what always tripped us was, okay, you got all this stuff in, what came out, and if they couldn't reasonably explain what was the middle of the box, we were like that made us automatically just start digging. We just started just like, you know, we brought out our inner rat terrier and just started digging. You know, if they could explain it rationally, we could work. And the other one was, you know, you have to have a stack test. It was like, when was your last stack test done? Was it 20 years ago? You probably need to redo it. I know it's expensive. It can be really pricey. But that was the other question that somebody else raised in our group.
No, I think that's key right there too, because if you don't know what's going on in your process, you need to. Someone at the facility has to know what happens inside the magic little black box. I like that. And digging to find out is definitely, hopefully, going to uncover a lot of those assumptions and get you better data. You'll know exactly where everything's going. Anyone else want to share?
I can share. I was in group room 2. We talked about a couple of different red flags, such as not always knowing how your data numbers are calculated, depending on who's at the facility on a given day. if you get inspected or somebody asks a question and you don't know how to find it. Transparency between all of your members of the planning groups is really important. It's important to keep internal tracking and confirm that what you have is the current year's data. Sometimes, you make a typo and you're pulling the wrong year. And employee turnover, like Pam mentioned, is really important because it's hard to track things if you're changing new employees and they have different SOPs for how they want to do something. It makes it harder if they're changing a process to track back to see how'd you get your numbers this year versus last year to make sure you're calculating things. And as a throwback to Walter, it's important to document so you know where to look and how you got that number for this year so you can do it again next year.
Thank you, Rebecca. I love the throwback. And just to keep things moving along, and because it ties into what Rebecca said, I will share a few from the group that I was in. In terms of the document, looking at past calculation spreadsheets that have no context for where some of the numbers have coming from, and how that can be such a challenge if someone's like, oh yeah, the emission factor for this is 100 pounds of waste for every 500 products through, and okay, where'd you get that from? And really sometimes having to start from scratch, sometimes kind of digging backwards into it and figuring out where it's coming from. And I think it was Max that pointed out one of his kind of red flags also is looking at prior year's data, not looking at just this data in a bubble, but okay, did I do this year? Let's look at that last year. Oh, everything's 3 times as much. Well, production didn't increase 3 times, so something's up with my data somewhere. The data that I pulled is making an assumption that I didn't want. So definitely a lot of great red flags, a lot of workarounds for it, and hopefully the discussions in all the breakout rooms are as good as the one in mine. But with that being said, I'm going to get back to sharing my slides so we can keep on trudging forward. So we are doing a deep dive into sections 1 and 2. And section 1, the reminder that I always needed when I started doing this so many years ago is that section 1 is facility wide. For some reason in my head, section 1 was always production unit wide, and it's not. You're looking at use of the listed chemical. And remember, this is the Form S for a single chemical. You're going to repeat this for every listed chemical you have over threshold. And this is all facility wide. The top, the manufactured, process, otherwise used. And then the other big 2 are the byproduct and the shipped in or shipped as product rather. That's what goes into your kind of initial mass balance. And then that section 2 is all the other stuff to make it make sense. If you don't have a full balance in section 1, then you need to go on to section 2. Typically, all of your information in these 2 sections should balance out, but I will say the one exception is if you have a wastewater treatment system that also has a Tura listed chemical, that is going to be balanced out using section 3, which is at the bottom of this page, but is not shown just so I could make this as big as possible. What we're going to spend the rest of our time doing is going through some of these letters and talking about the intricacies behind them. And we'll start with the production ratio. Production ratio is in that facility-wide section. So your production ratio is facility-wide, but it's basically reporting year over previous year. It's not the chemical used, it's your unit of product. So your unit of product, unless you're manufacturing a chemical that is completely a listed chemical, is not based on the chemical that you're using. It can be based on a whole bunch of things. I have 3 different examples up here, but I think there's close to 10 options on the Tura form. It can be just a number of widgets, or a weight of widgets, a volume of widgets. And I use widgets as just a term for anything and everything. Your production ratio will never be negative, but it should be a decimal format. Don't round it to a whole number. If your production increased, it's going to be greater than 1. So if you had a 20% increase in your production ratio, in your production ratio is going to be 1.2, a 20% increase of 1. If your production decreased, your production ratio would be less than 1. And then if you had no production in the current year, your production ratio would be 0. A quick throwback to the chemistry refresher I did at, I think it was last November or somewhat recently. The way that I have chosen to do dimensional analysis is kind of the grid approach. So you're going to see this frequently throughout the calculations that we're doing, but it's also just a good reminder. The TURA reporting is in pounds. As much as your production ratio can be in widgets or gallons or pounds or kilograms or whatever number you like, whatever units you like, the reporting all has to be in pounds. For a lot of the chemicals we're talking about, we tend to get data in gallons. So remember to use that density or specific gravity in the density of water to get the pounds of product that you've emitted. So in no particular order, probably manufacturing because it's top left in section 1. I wanted to talk about coincidental manufacturing. I feel like there's not a lot of mystery behind traditional and intentional manufacturing because that's why your company exists. But this coincidental manufacturing, for me anyway, has always been like looking in the genie's glass. Like, okay, what exactly is going on in there? I didn't want this to happen, but it kind of happened anyway. And there's a lot of common concerns for coincidentally manufactured chemicals from a TURA perspective. Most of these examples on here come from the TURA guidance documents, which I'll be referring to a lot today. If you don't tend to have the TURA guidance open, especially the appendix section, while you're doing your TURA reporting, I highly recommend it. There's a bunch of example calculations and bulleted lists to really just make your life so much easier as a TURA reporter or TURA planner. But there are a lot of different coincidentally manufactured, quite possible common approaches from a TURA perspective. If you're using nitric acid, you should be aware of water dissociable nitrate compounds. There's a bunch of things up there that come from the combustion of fuel. I've included hexchrome, formaldehyde, and hydrogen fluoride, all pretty nasty from a worker safety perspective as well. There's a bunch of metal salts, depending on how you're doing electroplating, that could be coincidentally manufactured as part of the electroplating process. So you may be processing them by starting out with metal salts, but you also may be coincidentally manufacturing them within those same electroplating baths. The items to watch out for here are specifically the higher hazard substances, things such as hydrogen fluoride or HF, also known as hydrofluoric acid. Again, far too many common names for some of these chemicals. That is a higher hazard substance, so it doesn't take much. The higher hazard substance threshold is only 1,000 pounds, not the 10,000, 25,000 pounds that we're used to. Sometimes your coincidentally manufactured items end up in a waste stream. So they may show up as a byproduct. And maybe you've seen them on waste profile analytical or waste discharge to an industrial wastewater treatment permit analytical data, and kind of glossed over them because, oh, well, I'm not processing it. I'm not otherwise using it. It's just in my waste stream. Well, if it's in your waste stream, it came from somewhere. So you probably coincidentally manufactured it. Make sure you're not overlooking those items just because it's not coming from your production reports. And the other thing on this is that chemistry dictates how much is created. And if you're not relying on analytical and you're just relying on the chemistry, you may be making more than you'd think you would. And I'm going to use another example from the May 28th presentation on the coincidental manufacture of water dissociable nitrate compounds. So when you're using nitric acid neutralization, you're going to be creating sodium nitrate, which is a water dissociable nitrate compound. But even if you're not using nitric acid above the threshold, you may be creating sodium nitrate above threshold. And the example I have here on screen is you're starting out with only 19,000 pounds of nitric acid below the processing and manufacturing threshold. You're going to be using, going back to chemistry here, the ratio of the molar mass of each compound and the ratio of the number of moles in the balanced chemical equation to come up with your number. And this is not a chemistry lesson, so I'm not going to get into the calculations too much. But I did just want to show how only 19,000 pounds of nitric acid is going to create over 25,600 pounds of sodium nitrate. So even though it's just a 1-to-1 ratio in the chemical equation, that doesn't mean they're created as far as weights at a 1-to-1 ratio. So maybe the time to brush up on your chemistry, or chances are if you have a manufacturing process, you have someone that's in charge of the chemistry behind the process. Maybe that's a lab manager or a plant manager. Tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, I need to figure out how many pounds of this we created. It's not something we test for, but based on what I understand of the chemistry going on here, I know we're creating it. So can you help walk me through these calculations? The next thing I want to talk about is reporting metal compounds for Tura. And this gets tricky. And I'll be honest, I think it took me several Tura reporting cycles before I finally understood exactly what I was doing. And again, this is in my infancy as a Tura planner, I didn't rely on the appendix nearly as much as I should have. Both the appendix and the instructions speak of metals as a metal compound. And this line that I have at the top of the slide here comes from the reporting instructions PDF available on DEP's website. But for metals reported as a compound, the total weight of the compound is what's manufactured, processed, or otherwise used. So an example here, lead oxide is coincidentally manufactured during the process and disposed of as scrap. So your lead oxide, the 297 pounds of lead oxide that's in your scrap, would show up on your manufactured line in section 1. However, as the reporting instructions continue, only the weight of the parent metal being reported is counted in calculating byproducts. And what they mean by the parent metal is the metal that you're concerned with, whatever the metal is in that metal oxide. So here our metal is lead. And again, gets back to chemistry. I'm going to use the molar ratio to to create a conversion to get the amount of lead out of my lead oxide. So I need the molar mass of my lead and the molar mass of my lead oxide. And that tells me that my lead oxide, which is just one element of lead, one element of oxide, is 0.928. It's basically 92.8% lead, and the remainder is oxygen. So to figure out how much lead I put in my byproduct, I take my 297 pounds of lead oxide, multiply it by that 0.928 ratio, and get 276 pounds of lead, which is going to be listed under byproduct in section 1. The remainder of that can thankfully go to simple subtraction. 297 minus the 296 pounds of lead gives me 21 pounds of oxygen. The way we fill this out on the section 1, little summary of the left, we have 297 pounds of lead oxide manufactured, 297 pounds of lead oxide as byproduct, but that's not how I'm going to put it in my form because the instructions tell me to only put the lead in as byproduct. So I break that up into 276 pounds of lead and 21 pounds of oxygen. So again, my entire compound goes in manufacturing. And this is filling out section 1 and 2, assuming this is the only lead I have, which is an assumption that is not going to be correct. Because obviously, if I created lead oxide, I have lead in my process somewhere, but we're just kind of drilling down deep into just how the lead oxide would go on these forms. So 297 would go into manufactured. 276, again, that regulated metal only would go as byproduct. But if you were to try to validate this form right now, you'd get an error saying that it's not mass balance because 297 does not equal 276. So what you need to do is use section 2 to kind of round it out below. And what I need is this chemical is a compound. Section 2D is telling you where to put that remainder. So on here on this chemical as a compound, that's where the non-metal portion of the compound goes. So now for my mass balance, I have 297 pounds manufactured, processed, or otherwise used. 276 pounds as byproduct, and that would get added together with the shipped in or as product to see if there's a mass balance in the upper section. There's not. So it kicks to the lower section, and this is where my remainder is. It's because it's a compound, so that compound dropped off.
Mel, can I stop you for a quick second?
Absolutely.
You're
Interrupt me anytime.
You talked about molar masses. Where
Yes.
does somebody find that information?
I love that question. And I wish I had my slides still with the periodic table, but I do not.
Would you find it on your safety data sheet?
You might find it on your safety data sheet. You could go old school and create it from a periodic table. And I backed up a few slides because the way you would look at this, if you look at lead, 207.2 grams per mole of lead is on the periodic table under lead. If you have a compound, you'd need to add them all together. Honestly, what I typically do when I need to get a molar mass, if it's not on my safety data sheet, I'm ashamed to say this, but Google is my best friend. If you Google molar mass of lead oxide, it should bring you pretty darn close to that number, 223.119.
No shame at all.
I say pretty darn close to that number because depending on the source, there are some periodic tables that give you more or less decimal numbers. So some of them may round and you might get 223.2 instead of 223.119, but it's going to be close. And from a significant digit standpoint, the one that you're finding is going to be close enough to what you would need to pull out common rounding errors. So great question, Pam. Thank you so much for asking that. So here's an example that touches on the entire use of lead. And I wanted to go through that first example because sometimes if you're not getting a mass balance, you need to go deeper. This whole class is all about a deep dive. So you may need to dig deeper into it. So in this example, this is more what it might look like. And again, this example is from the class that Pam did in May, and I apologize, Pam, because I know you did that class with a few other people and I'm not giving them credit. But this is also very similar, if not exactly, the example that's in the appendix section of the Tura guidance. So I've highlighted the key points here. I left the text in for context because these slides should be made available after this webinar. But basically you used a tin lead solder that contained over 3,000 pounds of lead. You also sent 6,000 pounds of dross offsite, which is your waste that you heard back from the disposal company contained a little over 1,700 pounds of lead compounds. That was sent offsite to a recycler, and they told you that of that 1,715 pounds of lead compounds, 1,585 pounds of it were lead. And you also know that because you were applying that solder to products that went out, you had over 1,700 pounds of lead that was shipped out to a customer product. So what we have over here is our super simple process flow diagram. You have your lead solder, your tin lead solder and your circuit boards going into your wave soldering. Your assembled circuit boards come out with some of the lead on them, and your solder dross comes out with what should be the remainder of the lead off of them. We are simplifying this. In a true wave soldering, you would have minor air emissions of lead also. But again, to keep it simple, we've kept it simple. So we have processed 3,358 pounds of lead. Our dross waste has 1,715 pounds of lead compounds, which contain 1,592 pounds of lead. And then our assembled circuit boards have 1,766 pounds of lead. In the reporting guidance, so that you're not getting kind of double penalized for lead and lead compounds when they're all related to the same process, if both lead and lead compounds are used above the 100-pound reporting threshold, you can report them on the same Form S. And I apologize for the typo on that. The S on this on goes with compounds, not with on. And you're reporting them on the same Form S, so you only pay one fee. So how do we put them on there? So I have my breakdown here, my 1,715 pounds of lead oxide manufactured, 335 pounds processed. This manufactured is from the dross. My lead went in as tin and lead. My lead was not compounded, but through the wave soldering process, I created lead oxides. I have 1,766 pounds of lead shipped out as product, 1,592 lead in byproduct, and then that remainder, the difference between my manufactured, my byproduct, those are the same things. Remember, my manufactured is my dross. So in my byproduct, I have 1,592 pounds of lead and 123 pounds of oxygen. And we're assuming that the remainder of that is lead from lead oxide. Doesn't really matter what it is. We're just making the assumption that it's lead oxide. It's some sort of lead byproduct, lead compound. So here I'd have the lead in my dross as manufactured, and that's the lead oxide. Remember, the full compound goes in the manufactured. My byproduct is only the lead in my dross. Somehow the lead in my process didn't appear, but we also have 358 pounds of lead processed up here on the process line. I apologize. I'm hoping it comes up in a second. There it is. Okay. So we start that over again because I think I confused myself, and I'm guarantee I confused someone else in that. Looking at the waste, we have 715 pounds of total lead compounds. 1,592 pounds of that is the lead, and the other 123 is the other chemicals in the dross. When we're looking at the lead that went through the process, we have 358 pounds of lead in the solder that was used and 1,766 pounds of lead in the product. So the way the mass balance is done, C plus D plus E must equal F plus G. And for those of you that don't have a calculator in front of you right now, it does not. So we have 123 pounds of other chemicals in the dross. But again, if you don't have a calculator on you, that still doesn't add up. Well, I also have the 1,592 pounds of lead in my dross that was converted to lead oxide. So this is why it's important to look at each one separately, but also look at them all together. My waste was balanced. My 1,715 plus 1,592, 1,715 equals 1,592 plus 123. I got a mass balance. Then when I start to put in my processed is where my mass balance kind of went away from me. I need to make sure I look at everything that happened. My lead that went impure was converted or consumed or transformed into that lead oxide. So I need to make sure I account for that. Okay, we're about an hour in. I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing about me for right now. Oh, Bill, do you have a question?
Can we go back one slide, please?
Sure.
There are two modes of thinking on this, and I don't know if we're half and half on this or not, but where I differ from how you did this form, and I know a few other people who do it this way, but like I say, it's how I see this. When it's shipped in product, it's not just lead, it's the total weight of that which was shipped. So it's not just the lead in product, it's the total weight, it's the whole compound weight that's shipped as product. And then once you get into the lead portion of it, that is what it is. I've never seen anybody put chemical was consumed or transformed in B like that for a lead dross operation, but only that for G shipped in product. Because that's everything, and you take that out of the 1715, and then what's left, things break down, and then it comes down to the chemical as compound. So you'll even have some of the weight of the compound, which is not shipped in product, because everything shipped in product is the total weight of everything. It's not just the lead, it's whatever else is in there or whatever your compound is. So that to me is how that should be accounted for, not just the metal. And then you can account for the other chemicals compound in section 2D. But that's how I do it. And that's how at least several people I've talked to do it. And there are a few who do it the other way. Depends on which regulator DP you talk to as well. You're going to get two different opinions there. But I think it's an important distinction. If I ship this off-site, shipped in as product, sorry.
That's okay.
recording stopped.
I don't think we did that.
I didn't mean to kill it, whatever happened. So basically that was the only comment that I wanted to make, is that there are two different ways to look at this. I think both of them are right. I've never had DP come back and tell me I'm wrong. And we've had this discussion many times in training over the years. So Rebecca, what do we
Challenging
do?
issue. There's no question. It's challenging, which is why we wanted to spend some more time on it.
Yeah, and Bill, the one thing I can say is that this example came directly from guidance from the Truro regulations. I forget if it was in a frequently asked question or directly in the appendices, but this is the guidance that's coming from Mass DEP for how to complete this. I don't know if we have time or if Rebecca would want to comment on that right now. I certainly don't want to put her on the spot, and I'm happy to kind of keep moving into the breakout room if we want to touch on this after the break, or even with an email follow-up afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that could be sent out later, something like that, just so I don't bog things down here with this.
Yeah, let's
Sure.
move on. Thank you for raising that, Bill. And Rebecca, I saw you were there, but why don't we go ahead and move on to the next part? And then if we have time at the end, we can maybe
Perfect.
have
Sure.
some more
Thank you.
Thank you.
That sounds great. Thanks, Pam. So I think the next thing is breakout session 2. And during breakout session 2, there's a worksheet to work on. It's not, for those of you that have had these training sessions with me, take out your calculator and do the math type of worksheet. It's just a get you thinking about where the numbers come from worksheet. So we're not jumping back into high school calculus class with this training course.
Right, and I did upload the breakout worksheet. It's on the chat, so if you haven't already done so, please do go there and open it up so that you can see what the problems are that we're referring to. I'll go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. I just tried to even out the numbers a little bit, so they might not be exactly what you were participating in the last time. And I will give you a 1-minute warning, and we'll plan on stopping at 1:15. So go ahead into your rooms, everybody.
Okay, we'll give everyone a minute to get back. And hopefully there's 2 teams that want to share some of the answers that they came up with to the questions on the sheet. So if anyone wants to share how their discussions went, raise a hand or just start talking.
Well, I didn't hold firm on the 115 and we got cut off anyway.
All right, so I don't see anyone sharing their discussion, so I'll share a little bit from what my group discussed, and hopefully that'll inspire someone else. We talked about for number 1 with the diesel and coincidentally manufacturing, how AP42 is a fantastic resource for coming up with determining if you exceed thresholds or not, and the fact that you should be checking every year just to make sure and have that data contained, even if you're well below thresholds, to make it a habit to constantly check just in case anything changes in the future. For the TUR reporting question, there was a bunch of other resources we wanted, not the least of which was the full stormwater analytical data, knowing that there might be some water dissociable nitrates in there. We wanted the process flow diagram for the new processes to find out what was going on in there and if there was anything crazy we needed to know about. We would happily give back the finance records and request some stockroom withdrawal records, since those more represent what was actually used in the process instead of just what was brought on site. And then we also noting that there is the wastewater treatment system, we'd want to get the monitoring data for stuff going off-site to the wastewater treatment, pre-treatment facility off to the local wastewater treatment plant. Did anyone else come up with anything that was not mentioned?
We talked about the fact that since they have processes that have stacks, to see if any stack testing was done when the new process came online.
Yeah, fantastic. Great point. Thank you. Anything else? All right. Hearing none and seeing that it's already 19 past the hour, I am going to jump back into the presentation so we can finish up on time. I'm a stickler for being on time with stuff. So I mentioned this a little bit, but the mass balance in section 2, the materials balance in section 2 is when you don't have a mass balance in section 1. So those 3 purple cells added up together, if they do not equal the 2 red cells, then you should be doing some explaining. And most of that explaining is going to be done in section 2. So one of the things to consider that we haven't touched on in a bunch of the other conversations we've had is that amount of chemical held in inventory. Now, sometimes whatever you make does not get shipped out in product. So it's possible that you need to add some inventory accountability methods to your reporting. If the amount of chemical or product held in inventory is positive, and it can be a positive or a negative number. If it's positive, it means that you made more items than you actually shipped. So you retained some of those in your inventory. It's also possible that you made a whole bunch of stuff in December of the previous year and shipped it out in January. And that way you actually shipped more than you made, in which case your amount of chemical or product held in inventory may be a negative number. And again, that's when you made less than you actually shipped off site. So don't overlook your shipping data in terms of how much is shipped out either in or as product. Just because you made it doesn't mean you actually put it into commerce. You may have to look at what may or may not have been held in inventory. The other one that we touched on a little bit, but not quite much, is that consumed or transformed value. And on this slide, I give another nod to the presentation last month, looking at the wastewater pretreatment system. And here we have production unit 1 that covers the process, but we can see that our wastewater pretreatment system is outside the process line, so outside of the production unit, as is typical. So what we know here from this process, we have 80,000 pounds of sulfuric acid going into our anodizing bath, another 50,000 pounds being used in wastewater treatment. So remember, our section 1 is facility wide. So we have 80,000 plus 50,000, or 130,000 pounds that were otherwise used. Breaking this down, in our production unit, we had 80,000 that was otherwise used and 50,000 pounds in wastewater treatment. Our byproduct comes from the 2 waste streams that go to our wastewater pretreatment system. This first counter rinse was our etching solution. We added sodium hydroxide to it, and there may or may not have been sulfuric acid here or in here. So for both of our recycle loops from both of our counter rinses, we had a total of 57 pounds of sodium hydroxide. So what does this look like? Well, we start with the 130,000 pounds otherwise used. Our byproduct is whatever leaves our production unit, which was those R waste streams. So that's our 57,000 pounds. In our process, remember, we used only the 87,000 pounds and we had 57,000 pounds come out, which means that remainder in there, the 23,000 pounds that we can't account for in our process, is what was consumed or transformed in our process. Now, we cannot forget the wastewater treatment, and this is where that lovely section 3 comes in, because the remainder to round out this balance, our materials balance, the 50,000 pounds that was used in wastewater treatment only shows up in wastewater treatment. It's here in our otherwise used, and we have it here drop down in wastewater treatment. So now we have, for a mass balance, 130,000. Remember, we're adding C, D, and E. Well, then that should equal F and G. It obviously does not. So we have F plus 2B plus the 50,000 in section C to round out our mass balance. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was a reminder about recycling loops. It really matters whether it's an integral recycling loop or a non-integral recycling loop. Non-integral recycling loops are outside of your process. So everything that goes to that recycling loop is considered a byproduct of the process. So very quickly, you can add up a whole bunch of byproducts. Here we have our byproduct, whatever was used, plus whatever was brought into our recycling would be a waste from this process. Going in must equal going out. So we have our 20,000 pounds of waste, and then all of the other waste, which would be coming from our process, amounts to all of the other inputs. If we were to add this as an integral recycling loop, we would only have coming out what the remainder of our waste is. So our inputs would be our byproducts, but our recycling loop is now not counted because it's inside our process boundary. So the only things leaving would be what we're adding to it. So we're adding 25,000 pounds of chemical in, which means from a balance perspective, we should have 20,000 pounds released into air and then only 5,000 pounds of byproduct coming out. But our byproduct would likely be the waste from our integral recycling loop, not directly from the process itself. So it's whatever is leaving your production unit. And it depends on whether it's inside or outside the production unit. So with that being said, I had intended on leaving more than 5 minutes for questions, but I think we had some fantastic conversations in our breakout rooms. But there is 5 minutes left in the presentation. If anyone has any questions, I welcome them now.
Yeah, please do let us know any points of confusion that you want to just check on, any questions about resources.
I've got a question. I have a client with the wastewater treatment chemical that trips the threshold, but it's only used in wastewater treatment. Is that something that gets reported?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and it's really covered in that facility-wide use, correct?
Just to chime in, if that's your only chemical for your entire report, you'd make a a different answer on your cover sheet of your filing. If it's one that is in addition to other chemicals, you might need to make a dummy production unit just for that chemical itself. So there are different layouts to the forms. So sometimes the form has section 5 question that most people see. If you're only reporting for wastewater treat, it actually doesn't have a Form S section 5. That actually forms on a different page because that's the Form S section 5 is specific to your production unit. If you don't have a production unit because you only do wastewater treat, it is on a different page. So it does, that wasn't something we covered super in depth in the spring training. And I noticed it in this training, but I didn't call it out. So just pointing that one out there because of the question.
It's a good question.
Thank you for that explanation, Rebecca. I appreciate that. Any other questions?
Go ahead. I got a question. So I looked at the master list of the chemicals that you're required to report, and zinc wasn't on there. Zinc fumes and zinc dust is, and zinc compounds are, like zinc ammonium chloride and zinc oxide and all that. But zinc isn't on there. So am I reading that right? That if we process a large number of pounds of zinc, that's not reportable. It's only the zinc dust and zinc fumes and the zinc compounds that are generated.
I'm hoping that someone from DEP or OTA can chime in on that one because that's not a question I've ever pondered, but it's a great question, Dylan. Thank you so much for asking it.
Oops. This is Heather from Turi. I believe that you're right, Dylan. I always like to double check myself in the documentation before I answer a question like that. And I can see that Rebecca's doing that simultaneously, but I believe that you're right. I'm going to be looking around page 80 something on the reporting appendices for the information on reporting metals. Go ahead, Rebecca.
So if you're looking on the chemical list and you're looking under zinc, it says zinc, fume, or dust. And if you kind of scroll over, column J is qualifiers and definitions. So that talks about if you have pure and compound forms, you'd report them under the zinc compounds category. So you really need to look at what kind of zinc you have. And then does it fall into the zinc, fume, or dust definition? So you'd have to dig a little deeper. I think Heather's talking about where we define the different types of zinc. That's helpful. I don't have that handy, but I went the opposite direction, Heather. I went the chemical list.
But it raises another good point, which is that you really do need to understand the list and spend some time. So if you are reporting at your facility and you think that perhaps there's another chemical that you might have reporting obligations associated with, first of all, that also means you'll have planning obligations for it. So you really want to get this clear, and this is a complicated part of the process. So finding the resources that we've pointed to and knowing that you can reach out to anybody in the Turo program, I think is really the way to go. It is 1:30, and so we can continue to talk, but I do want to let folks know that it's time you can go. And I want to remind you all that I will be sending out a survey after the webinar is done, certainly by tomorrow morning, so that we can get feedback on you on the webinar and on future topics. So please do look for that. Okay, so 1:30, if you need to go, please feel free. Thank you very much, Mel. I don't know if you're able to stay a little bit longer. That would be great.
Sure, I can.
Okay, thanks.
This is for Dylan, if I could. Dylan, once I finally got the spreadsheet opened up and got to zinc, fume, and dust, what was your question? I apologize.
Yeah, I know. Thanks, Bill.
It was just saying that when I was talking with the American Galvanizers Association, they were agreeing that zinc itself, like zinc ingots, aren't reportable under Tura or TRI, but zinc fume and zinc dust is, because that's being released into the environment at that point potentially. And then the zinc compounds like zinc ammonium chloride or zinc oxide or anything that's created from a galvanizing process, that would be reportable. But the zinc leaving the building on the product itself is not hazardous or reportable.
Are you talking about any brazing operations here or just metal finishing?
It's like a metal coating process, a galvanizing process.
Okay, all right. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
I think you need to like dig in a little bit deeper with the resources that we've been sharing for that.
And I think how you're interpreting it sounds correct. I do think there's something special about zinc oxide. I would like to just take a look for that and get back to you.
Okay. So Heather, would you be the best person to kind of go back and forth with on this?
I'm happy to help you with it. I always defer to DEP for regulatory answers,
Yep.
but happy to help you walk through it as well.
Okay, cool.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and Agnes just posted there's a general contact email for anyone at DEP. So, you know, we have Rebecca joining us today, but you know, there are other folks in the TURA program at DEP who may be able to help you. So tura.program@mass.gov is a good email to have in your contact list.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Other questions or thoughts for the few of us who are still here?
Well, I'm gonna go. Nice seeing everybody.
Thanks.
And I'm just looking at the chemical list. Zinc oxide was delisted. Is Dylan still there? Is he gone?
He's there.
Okay.
So if we don't have to report zinc oxide, that's great.
You don't have to report oxide as part of the compounds. Do not. Yep.
Cool.
And you can see that on the chemical list. It's crossed out. So, you know, when you pull that up, you should be able to see it there.
Okay. Yeah, I must not have seen, must not have looked that hard. Okay.
Oh, well, no, there's a lot to look for. I'm not saying you didn't look hard enough. I'm just saying you can reinforce what I'm telling you by looking at the list.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Izzy's just following up. Is zinc oxide reportable under TRI?
Oh gosh, there's a TRI ruling. I would have to check TRI. Sorry, Izzy.
Right. It is a complicated. It's very complicated. So it was a really good discussion point, Dylan. So thanks for raising that. Mel, thank you so much for your presentation and for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mel.